Yo, Alpha Draft, that's the home of the game. For fantasy esports, they're the premier name. Get your Skrilla up. If your skills are ill enough, if you want to play fantasy esports, do so at alphadraft.com. If you want to. I didn't say you had to. I didn't have an AK to your dome blowing, popping off in your face. But if I did, actually, I wouldn't threaten you at gunpoint to play Alpha Draft. If you just want to play Alpha Draft, do. If you don't, just watch the rest of the video. I mean, it's over anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. So the next major, Dreamhack Cluj-Napoca in Romania, starts next week, and we've got these four big names who all seem the obvious favourites to win the event. We've got Fnatic, the two-time reigning champions in a row, but who've been on a bit of a slump for their standards. We've got Envious, who've been very hot recently, won a couple of titles. Everyone's expecting big things of them. They look very dangerous. There's Virtus Pro, have been beastly the last few tournaments, haven't quite made it there for wins except for at Dubai, but they're so dangerous whenever they are on form, and they've been beating Fnatic recently, so they've got that going for them. Always play TSM close. And then you've got TSM. And the thing with TSM is they haven't won many tournaments recently. Yeah, over the year they've won a bunch, but they won the last big tournament, PGL Season 1. They beat Virtus Pro twice to do so. They beat Fnatic as well. They went pretty much undefeated at that. In fact, they did go undefeated 6-0 at that tournament. Had crazy stats. And yes, they've been losing Envious, but they've been consistently elite level for the last 4 to 5 tournaments in a row. Pretty much all year they've been at consistently elite level once they reach that spot. So I actually think, after reflecting on it, trying to figure out how do I weigh up different criteria, how does form go against class, go against general styles, how do they match up, how do the players match up in all these different teams, it's actually my conclusion that if you were to put the teams that had played all the events this year into a computer simulation with their current level of form, I think TSM would win this major, and they should win this major. Now, there are reasons why they might not, which I'll get to later, but let's address why they should win the major, why everything's going in their favor to a degree, or at least enough factors are that I edge it to them. So, first and foremost, this isn't a reason as to why they should, but it's a reason as to why you would think they would be fully motivated to win, which is that they are the only one of those elite teams I mentioned that don't have any players in the lineup who've won a major. Okay, Envious now have Kenny S and Apex, who've never won a major, but the other three have won a major. Obviously, Virtus Pro's entire lineup was won a major. Fnatic's entire lineup was won a major. TSM's lineup never even been in the final of a major. So this team's, in theory, still very hungry. Plus, you've got young guys like Device, who's in the prime, but he's a young guy still. He's not a guy who's like over the hill in any sense, or has to like remotivate himself to need to want to win now. Beyond that, you look at their year overall, and they're absolutely one of the best teams of the entire year. I mean, they've won, I think it's like 5 titles this year. Let me think. They won the first PGL, then they won, what would it be after that? Face It, then they won Fragbite Masters, then they won the next Face It, Phase 2, and now they won PGL 1. They won 5 titles this year, which is big time stuff. It's more titles than a lot of the teams out here. They've been in like 10 finals. I mean, how you decide finals is difficult to talk about, but that's basically the only team I think with more finals is Fnatic this year. It's how incredibly consistent they've been. And in terms of top 4s, which for me really rounds out how consistent you are when you're an elite level team, they've had 13 top 4s, and only 2 times did they ever fail to make a top 4. Now, it's worth pointing out they've been in less events than pretty much everyone else in this list, but to only fail to get top 4 twice is extremely good. That's almost Fnatic levels. I mean, Fnatic haven't failed to make top 4 all year, but that's how incredibly good they are. The thing is, we obviously acknowledge Fnatic's like the greatest team ever, or one of the best ever. TSM's been extremely good. It's just their year's been masked by how great Fnatic is, and now NV coming up now, VP having times. It almost masks how great TSM are. Because if you look at the totality of the year, realistically, at the moment, TSM is the second best team of the year. It's just the way it is. But they haven't got a major, and they haven't even made the final of a major. Now, let's look at the players on this team. So they've got the best player in the world, Device. For my money, at least, he's the best in the world. The most consistent player in the world, yet he's also playing incredibly high-level CS. One of the most skilled players in the world. Had an incredible rise in form where he's stopped being so variable and just become extremely good, consistently good, always above average within all the games he's playing at the top level, deep in tournaments. So extremely good player. I did my own video, I'll put it up there as to why I think he's the best player. Then you go beyond just best player. So he's going to be able to match against All of them, Snacks, Kenny S, Happy, whoever it might be that's the best player for each of those other teams. Then you're going to put him up against guys like, then you can look at the other member of his team. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum, the support player. I think you could make a strong case that Xyp9x is the best support player in the world right now. When you talk about best support player, the obvious names that are springing to mind is Xyp9x. He comes as Zypex. I call him Xyp9x. Xyp9x, you got MBK from Envious, very good player. You've got Crims from Fnatic. Now, historically, I obviously favour Crims. I think you could make a good case he's the strongest support player in the CSGO history. Not least since from the support position at one point in time, he's the best player in the world for like a month or two at the end in late 2014. But with that said, at the moment, I think that the player who I'm going to edge it to is Xyp9x, because ever since that rumour started about them possibly replacing AZ with him just for the last major, his level's just gone way up. And he was so good in Dubai, so good at Dreamhack London, amazing at PGL Season 1. Didn't have to play as excellently, but had those maps where he was extremely good. He plays the support ball very well. He frags extremely well. What edges him over Crims for me is Crims still has time off, has maps off, has games off, where sometimes someone like Flush have to step in, but is a very consistent player. MBK is not so consistent, but he has a great variance, like you saw in that final map of the Gfinity Champion of Champions, where he had like 35 kills, and he's the support player. Amazing stuff. The thing is, Xyp9x combines the two. He's really consistent. He plays his spots very well. He's extremely good on certain maps, and then he'll have big fragging performances, and had some otherworldly support performances this year. So they've got two players there who are already some of the best in the world at their positions. Then you look who is their second star. Now, here's what I always found interesting about TSM, and what I think allowed them to be so consistent and so good at certain points in time, which was this year, it really has been back and forth as to who the second best player was. Traditionally, it's always been the double D's combo. It's always been Device is the best player, Dupree's the second best player. Dupree's an excellent entry fragger, quite good in terms of just raw rifle fragging, always will get his kills in a game. But there was a while, especially I think at their first victory, PGL Season 1, where Cajun was kind of the second best player in terms of the fact that when he would go off for big games, 25 to 30 kill maps, he would have huge impact on the game. He could take over a game, he'd get an AWP, he'd just dominate completely. I think he had an excellent game in one of the maps at MLG at the beginning of the year, X Games Aspen against Fnatic. So yeah, very, very strong player, very, very dominating player. But the thing is, he's actually fallen off over the last month or so. If I had to pick anyone from the lineup who's been having difficulty, I think it's been Cajun. She had maps that have been difficult, he's had tournaments that have been kind of average. So for me, what's allowed them to get back to being a championship level team again, where they won PGL Season 1, was Dupree coming back. And Dupree having 30 frag games. Like, not only that, 30 frag games with amazing KDA as well. Like 30 frags and 17 deaths. Not like 30 frags and 25 deaths. Just like having a massive impact on the game. Where you're doing the insane frags for your team, you're barely giving anything up, and the swing in the game is almost, you're single-handedly winning the game pretty much. So at the moment, that's what's great about them, is they've almost got a mini Fnatic thing going on there, where they've been able to transition the second best player to someone else from the original person. It's not like because Cajun has the time off, their team drops down. No, actually they're better than ever at the moment, despite the fact Cajun's been having a couple of tournaments that have been a bit off. With that said, he's still an extremely dangerous player, and if you've got Dupree playing at a very good second star level, then if Cajun doesn't even have to be the second star, even when he's not as consistent, those odd games where he does go crazy are going to way put him over the top, because who's the third best player on another team who's going to have monster games like that? Okay, yes, people like Envious at the moment have someone like that. VP, it's not as often, certainly isn't the case as often, and then over on the Fnatic side, they're having difficulties getting two players to be really good at the moment. So their days of having three go off all the time, that's kind of not here at the moment. So there's a lot of firepower. For me, basically TSM has as much firepower as anyone in the game. I think only Envious can edge them. Then you look at the fact that for an in-game leader, Carrigan is both a pretty good in-game leader. I think he's one of the better ones. He's definitely be top 3, top 2, top 3 in terms of strats. His strats fit his team well. His strats are quite intelligent overall. They're adaptive, but he still runs from a playbook, which makes sense. So he's running his favoured things, and he's figuring out the things that work and hammering them home, not just switching up randomly, which I don't like when players do, and in-game leaders. And more importantly, for an in-game leader, it's not that he's a great fragger. I think people exaggerate that, but he'll have maps where he will be an excellent fragger for an in-game leader. And that's actually quite big. And obviously, as an AWPer, which is quite unusual for an in-game leader, he can have a unique effect on maps, as we most famously have seen on maps like Mirage. I also think one of the most important, you'll always hear me bang on about this at events. The reason why I've spent so much time breaking down pick ban and map pool strength is because it really gives you a good sense of how someone's going to win a series, if they're going to win a series, and where they're going to win the series. And when you know that context, you get a sense for if they win on a map that they were supposed to be a little bit weaker on. If they win that, then they're going to be even stronger overall, and they've got extra chances here. It really does set up the context of a series well. Well, the key thing is, for me at the moment, the major quality that tends to decide for me who I think will win tournaments and who I usually predict tends to be map pool strength, actually. When VP was on this sick run, part of that was because they had almost the entire map pool. Fnatic, when they won this last major, the reason I had them build was, yes, they had this great record against everyone. Yes, they were always top 4, always making finals. It wasn't just winning events, though. They had the best map pool of anyone. So I knew they could play any team and they would have no real weaknesses. And then they could abuse the map pool if they did the correct pick, ban, veto stage to exploit their opponents, especially if their opponents had a limited map pool, like we know certain teams did, NIP, Luminosity. These sorts of teams didn't have a map pool that could hold up. So you look at the map pool of TSM and my God, it's unreal. There's basically only one map that they can't play, or rather don't want to play, and that map is Cobblestone. And because of that, they can just veto that 100%, and they are reasonably safe because they can play everyone else on every other map. And the reason why they will want to veto Cobblestone, by the way, is because those other teams, think of them. Envious, we've seen they're very good on Cobblestone. Fnatic, amazing on Cobblestone. VP, a top 3, top 4 team in the world on Cobblestone. So you don't want to play teams on Cobblestone anyway. And it's one of the strongest maps for those teams. So it's going to be an obvious takeaway for TSM. So they're already getting a slight advantage there against some of these teams in terms of the matchup, taking a very strong map away because they don't play it anyway. And then they play everything else. So let's look at it. Dust 2, for my money, still the best team in the world. Absolutely fantastic Dust 2 team on both halves. That's what makes them so dangerous on that map. They can win from both halves. You never know after the first half how where you're at in a game versus TSM. As a general trend that actually applies to most aspects of TSM, as I'll talk about later. Then you go after Dust 2. Now, previously you'd go to something like Overpass, Mirage, Inferno. No. What we're going to have to go to now, based on PGL and based on some of the recent tournaments, is actually going to be Train. It was a map that, okay, they banned Cobblestone. They only tend to play Train every now and then. Now, online, they had this insane record on it. They'd only played a few instances on LAN. These guys are fucking amazing on Train. We've seen they have that key quality you need on Train. Incredible T-sides. And then they have that super famous, infamous lockdown CT half that they have on all the great CT maps, and they can apply that to Train as well. And we've seen they beat Virtus Pro, who I think are the best Train team, twice on it. So now TSM's even in contention to be the best Train teams. They've already got Dust 2 they're best on, maybe Train now, and then they were beating Virtus Pro and Overpass. Now Overpass has been here and there, but only against teams like Fnatic. In general, they're a phenomenal Overpass team. Pretty strong on this map. And now to beat Virtus Pro on it as well is just above and beyond. So Overpass is dangerous. Then you go to the ones that, for me, the two that are kind of in the middle for them in terms of where the other teams are, but still good, and they will beat other teams on that, Mirage and Inferno. Now, obviously, it depends on the team. You don't really want to play Virtus Pro or Mirage. You run in the risk if you play someone like Fnatic historically on Inferno. It's one of the maps they're going to be good on. But TSM's still top 5 in the world on these maps, certainly. Maybe even higher. That's how deep their map pool is. The only map that TSM in theory are weak on aside from Cobblestone, which they ban, is Cache. And that also tends to be another ban for them. It tends to be a map they don't want to play. And so as a result, it doesn't tend to be that much of an issue for them. It's weird that they're not so good on it, because earlier in the year, when they were just about to start winning tournaments, they were a very good Cache team. One of the best Cache teams. They used to match up very well against teams like Virtus Pro, who were extremely dangerous on it, against Envious. But for some weird reason, they got it in their heads. They don't like it. It's a map that actually shows the strengths of Xyp9x when you see him play it in that B site. So, actually, it's the A site, the one on the left, CT. So it's kind of bizarre to me that they don't, but that's a good example of where a player can be strong on a map, but a team doesn't like a map, and psychologically they don't want to play the map. So I still think they can be decent on that map. Luckily for them, people like Fnatic have been kind of shying away from it. Virtus Pro have shied away from it, definitely. Only really Envious might pick it and might use that as an exploit. So when you consider this map pool, there's not a whole lot of weaknesses, and there's not a lot of weaknesses that other teams can exploit here because of the strengths as they match up. So let's think of the strengths of TSM as a team. First and foremost, they are one of the strongest T-side teams in the world. Like, if I had to pick T-side teams in the world, I would rank it like this. I would probably give the edge to Envious because they can be so explosive on T-side, and the way they can brute force it is incredible. I would actually give TSM the second rank as T-side because they're so consistent and yet very good and win a lot of T-side halves. And I'd put VP third just because VP are extremely dangerous but less consistent, and it's more map specific. Like, yes, on Train or Cobblestone, they're going to be extremely dangerous. On some of the other maps, though, Inferno, you never know, because if it's not Virtus Plow mode, they're not necessarily going to be such beasts. So I'll give TSM second best T-side team in the world. As CT, at the moment, they might be the best CT team in the world. With Fnatic's problems, I think it might legitimately be the case that TSM is the best CT team in the world. They're so consistent, and they're so good at so many spots, and they've even managed to switch things up. Like on Inferno, they switched over Device and Dupree. Instead of Cajun and Carrigan, they're playing the banana site, and they're playing it back in the way that you used to do, like 8 months ago that teams don't do anymore. They don't even take the Fnatic style, take control with smokes of banana and use it for information. They don't do that, and yet they're winning Inferno games versus top teams, and they're always in the game, even against your envious Fnatic VP type level teams. So they're extremely dangerous on both sides. You never know fully where you're at in a game. They have players who, they have a really even skill spread. Obviously, Envy have the most wide skill spread because every single player on Envy at one point has been a top 2 player in a world-class team. In this team, it's the case that I think the skill spread is amazing among the first 4, and then for an in-game leader that's supposed to be a dedicated in-game leader, there's also some good skill and fragging from Karrigan, but extremely skill spread out among the other 4 though. Cajun, Device, Dupree, Xyp9x. Each of them has incredible skill, and so that's part of what makes them so tactically good, because this tactical system they have means that if one of those 2 die, it's not game over. The others can still execute the strategy, or so many of the players can win from clutch situations. Dupree has an insane clutch stat. Xyp9x is obviously very good at them. Device has pretty good stats, even though obviously he doesn't always get put in that situation so often. So this is a situation where you can't just kill a TSM player and feel it's safe in the rest of the round. The threat's ever present, no matter who's alive. Then you look at the fact that they have not only the most consistent players, like Device and Xyp9x are 2 of the most consistent players in the world relative to their role, but then, aside from those 2, they have guys who are big fraggers to go along with those. I mean, obviously Device is a big fragger, and Xyp9x sometimes is for a support player, but Dupree and Cajun B, Dupree's a consistent big fragger now in the last month, 2 months. Cajun B can be a big fragger in terms of individual games. There's 4 players who can top the scoreboard, who are consistent or who are big fraggers. That combo is so dangerous because even if only 1 or 2 goes off, the combination of you can have 2 going off here and then another one goes off next map. You can get it anywhere you want it from TSM. You can get it from Xyp9x with this consistent support play. Device just grinds you down. Cajun has a massive AWP game or a huge CT half on Dust 2. Then Dupree's there with his great T sides, 15 kills, entry kills, whatever you might need. Really amazing team, and that's what makes them so dangerous. Consistent players, and that transitions into a consistent team. One of the most consistent teams in terms of frag output and overall level in the whole game. And for all these aspects I've named before, how consistent their CT side is, how consistently strong their T side is, how consistently deep their map pool is. In terms of weaknesses, yes, they have weaknesses. Their major weakness at the moment is actually their record against Envious, the fact that they've repeatedly lost them. Now, they've been very close games. They've always been competitive games overall, so that gives me some hope. I don't think it's over in that one entirely. They're not getting just stomped by Envious. Then you look at the fact that another big flaw has been that in past majors, they have choked when it got deep in the major. That's still never fully been figured out. They've still sort of even done it at Cologne. To a degree, Envious was very good. I don't want to take it away entirely, but they haven't quite gotten over that hump. That still has to be fixed before they can win. And that's why I just say they should win the major. I can't say they will, because that's a big uncertainty. I can't know if they're going to have overcome that yet. They're obviously extremely good at medium and other sized events, but that one, yeah, there was an issue there. Then finally, a final weakness for them is that even though, yeah, they've beaten Virtus Pro twice at PGL, Virtus Pro is always going to be a bad matchup for them. Or not a bad matchup, a difficult matchup, a dangerous matchup. Because VP at their strongest, the way they match up against TSM, they have a lot of shared map pool, they have a lot of strengths in terms of how good they are on T sides. Virtus Pro is willing to be very aggressive, and as a result be able to just get into some of those more back defensive style setups that TSM likes to use against the lesser skilled teams. VP can't always match up skill-wise, but in general, VP historically were always a very clutch team. That's one of the things that was actually different at PGL Season 1, was that VP didn't win many of the clutches and TSM was winning all of them. It's a much more even game when you consider how close most of those 4 maps were anyway. When VP's winning the clutches, Taz is winning clutches, Bialy's winning clutches, when that happens, it becomes a very even game. That's why, to me, TSM versus VP is the best matchup in CSGO, still to this day, and it has been all year, actually. It's a fantastic matchup with so many different qualities going for it, and the fact that it potentially could happen in the final of a major, that would be absolutely beautiful, I think. Now then, you also have to look at some other factors. So Device, who's the best player in the world, is in peak form at the moment. If ever they were going to win a major, now should be the time for that reason, along with the others. But that can be a primary reason because he's in peak form. When you have the best player in the world and you have one of the best teams in the world and he's in peak form, you've got a good chance to win majors. Then you look at the fact that almost all of their roster is in near peak form. I can't say Cajun B is. Karrigan's a little bit off. Xyp9x is in peak form. Dupree is in peak form. Device is in peak form. They've got the best map pool in the world at the moment. I don't think that's even debatable entirely. Envious have shown us a very deep map pool. It's very impressive. But a couple of those we've only seen once or twice in certain key situations, and I'm not entirely sold on some of them. the events in Romania, which might sound weird, but you have to remember what's interesting about this team is that 2 of the 5 events they've won, 2 PGLs, were both in Romania. So I'm not saying that doesn't really hold that much weight, but it's an interesting factor. Maybe for some reason they feel more comfort there, or they like something about it. I don't know what it could be, but you never know with those factors. It could be contributing to something. Then there's the factor that they've got a good matchup against everyone except Envious. So they're a counter to Fnatic still to this day, except for that Fragbite show match, which was the show match, to be fair. They're Fnatic counter, so historically they've been able to beat them. Admittedly, Fnatic might not be in the final, we don't know. They play VP very close, and last time they played them, dominated them over the 4 maps, in as much as they didn't drop a map. They managed to overcome in all the key situations. So at the moment, yeah, they've been winning against VP. They only really lost in Dubai. They've got a good matchup there overall, even though it's dangerous for them still. They wreck a team like Na'Vi, who's just below that Elite 4, regularly, and always have wrecked Na'Vi. And they're very good versus North American teams. In general, TSM gets in the ass of the NA teams because players like Device feel no fear when they play NA teams, and they just rip him a new one completely. You saw when he was going ham on fucking CLG, I think it was on Inferno, IM Gamescom. You have to remember, it was Luminosity that upset TSM. Now, Luminosity aren't an NA team. I don't care how many times people say it. Now then, here's what's interesting. People who are fans of Envious or have been watching Envious, knowing how incredibly good Envious is right now in their form. Yes, Envious is also a favourite to win this event. So why do I favour TSM over Envious at the moment? In terms of the on-paper factors. Obviously, Envious have less of the choking factor, which is a good thing for them. Although then again, Kenny S did have that bad final. He hasn't ever won a major. Apex has had his own issues. But as a whole team, I think Envious does have a better grasp on the not choking aspect than TSM at the moment. Let's look at it like this. TSM has better routine. The way they play game in and game out makes sense. It's the same. There's a logic to it. You can fix things as a result of it. You know what to rely upon. They have a deeper map pool that's going to benefit them against nearly all the teams. The deep map pool means I think it's almost impossible for TSM not to reach the semi-finals of this tournament. The only way I could see them not reaching the semis if there's some crazy group stage result, which means they play like Envious or VP in the round of 8. If that doesn't happen, they're going to be in the semis no matter what. They're the one team I can definitely guarantee that no matter what the matchup is, because of this, how the routine and the rhythm they've got and how deep their map pool is. They're going to have great matchups against almost everyone. They've got really good set strengths, so they know how they win the game and they know how they can lose the game. And that's why they're able to steer these games to consistently be so good. And they have great consistency in all aspects. Star players, role players, in-game leader, T-sides, strong CT sides, map pool. To me, they have overall the complete package, minus the matchup against Envious, danger against VP, and then the third one, obviously, is the choking. So, I don't know if they will, but I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to make a bet on them. I think it's got to be them or Envious as the big favourites. And here's the reason why on paper, TSM should be leaving Romania with this major and kind of making a good storyline, as much as then all of these great teams, these great historical cores will have won a major. Because it'd be a shame if they never reached a final and never won a major ultimately. Thanks to Alpha Draft for the Skrilla.